Mark Broom. Let's start by taking a look at the day's headlines. Quiet on the surface, but activity behind the scenes. Washington's point man on North Korea is in Beijing for talks on Pyongyang. This as a senior North Korean official claims President Trump would have been okay on snapback sanctions if it wasn't for the hawks in his administration. A Seoul court refuses a prosecution request for a warrant to arrest a former environment minister. Prosecutors say the former minister abused her power by forcing those critical of the Moon administration to resign. Plus, more minister hopefuls are in the hot seat at the National Assembly as they seek to lead key ministries in the South Korean government. We have all the latest from Parliament. Our top story this morning, the White House has cleared up the confusion caused by President Trump's tweet last week and said sanctions on 2 Chinese shipping companies remain in place. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders told reporters on Monday that these are very strong sanctions and the president doesn't feel it's necessary to add additional sanctions at this time. Sanders added President Trump likes the North Korean leader and that they want to continue negotiating. This comes after Trump tweeted last week that he had ordered the withdrawal of those sanctions, which seemed to be referring to sanctions announced by the US Treasury the previous day. But administration sources said the announcement was referring to sanctions that haven't been revealed yet. The US State Department has confirmed that Washington's special representative for North Korea, Stephen Biegun, is currently visiting Beijing. While it didn't reveal any details of his itinerary, he's expected to discuss the North Korean nuclear issue with his Chinese counterpart. Biegun visited London earlier for similar discussions with working-level officials from the UK, France and Germany. It has emerged that US President Donald Trump appears reasonably positive about a so-called snapback sanctions mechanism against North Korea if it helps the denuclearization process. This is according to the transcript of a speech made by a senior North Korean official during her recent meeting with foreign missions in Pyongyang. Our Kim Hyo-sun with the details.
North Korean Vice Foreign Minister Choi Sun-yi reportedly said that during the Hanoi Summit, President Trump was positive about the snapback sanctions mechanism, which is lifting sanctions yet immediately reimposing them for any violations of agreements. South Korea's Yonhap news agency said Choi made the remarks while speaking with foreign missions in Pyongyang on March 15th. According to a transcript of Choi's address that the South Korean news agency obtained on Monday, Choi stated that President Trump was flexible about further agreements if the 2 parties include the snapback clause in the agreement. Choi also explained the level of hostility and distrust that Trump's top aides have against the regime, including U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and White House National Security Advisor John Bolton. She said they acted as hurdles in reaching a meaningful outcome during the Hanoi Summit. Foreign media also reported that after the briefing, Choi explained the 2 leaders have great personal relations and chemistry. Choi also said Chairman Kim is determined to carry out the denuclearization negotiation with Washington despite a series of internal opposition and challenges. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Now, North Korea sent some staff back to the Joint Liaison Office in Kaesong on Monday, just 3 days after the regime withdrew all its personnel from that office. The North Koreans reportedly told their South Korean counterparts that Pyongyang's commitment to the office remains unchanged as the regime wants to continue working on the projects laid out under the various North-South joint declarations. Kan Hyung-woo reports.
North Korean officials are now back at the Inter-Korean Joint Liaison Office at Kaesong after the regime suddenly decided last Friday to pull them all out. The South Korean government welcomed the North's decision to return to the communication channel facility.
South and North Korea held a meeting in the morning of both sides' communication representatives. Moving forward, we plan to continue to run the Inter-Korean Joint Liaison Office as usual.
According to Seoul's Unification Ministry on Monday, 4 or 5 North Korean officials showed up at the office and told the South Koreans that they had come to work as usual. That's fewer than the 10 people the North normally sends, but the 2 sides' representatives in charge of communicating with each other met at 9:30 a.m. and had a brief conversation. In that meeting, the North said it has every intention of carrying out inter-Korean projects in accordance with the agreement signed by President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. They held another round of talks at 3 p.m. as usual. Seoul's Unification Ministry says North Korea has not clarified why it withdrew its staff from the liaison office last Friday or why it sent them back on Monday. When they left on Friday, the North Korean officials said simply that it was a decision made by those higher up. The two Koreas opened the joint liaison office last September in a bid to boost exchanges by having a round-the-clock communication channel. But the weekly meetings between both sides' directors haven't been held since early March after North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump failed to reach an agreement at the Hanoi Summit in late February. Kanyomu, Arirang News.
On March 26th, South Korea commemorates independence fighter Ahn Jung-geun, who was executed by Japanese colonial authorities in 1910. A ceremony is being held at the Ahn Jung-geun Memorial Hall in central Seoul to mark the 109th anniversary of his death. Some 500 people, including the Minister of Patriots and Veterans Affairs and Ahn's family members, are attending the event. He was executed at the age of 30 after he assassinated Hirobumi Ito, the first Japanese resident general posted to Korea in 1909 during Tokyo's occupation of the country. The shooting took place at Harbin train station in China, where a memorial hall honoring Ahn Jung-geun will soon reopen, according to local sources. Ahn is also considered a hero in China as an activist against Japanese aggression. A South Korean court has approved a request to seize Mitsubishi Heavy Industries' trademark and patent assets. The decision made by a district court in Daejeon on Monday comes after the Japanese firm refused to heed an earlier order by the Supreme Court to compensate victims of wartime forced labor. Mitsubishi will be barred from exercising 2 trademark rights and 6 patents, which is worth about $700,000. It has now become the second Japanese company to get slammed by a South Korean court. Nippon Steel and Sumitomo Metal Corporation were stripped of their assets in January for not compensating victims of forced wartime labor. Confirmation hearings for President Moon Jae-in's cabinet picks continues at the National Assembly today. Nominees tapped to head the Ministries of Unification, Culture and Oceans. They're going to be in the hot seat. The ruling party has called the candidates fit for the job, citing their background and experience. However, the opposition bloc claims the candidates are the worst picks ever, vowing to closely screen them. Under the spotlight in particular is Unification Minister nominee Kim Yeon-chol over his past remarks regarding inter-Korean developments. He has referred to the death of a South Korean national at a mountain resort in North Korea in 2008 as a, quote, rite of passage, while disregarding that North Korea was behind the sinking of a South Korean warship in 2010. But the confirmation hearing itself is seen as a formality, as cabinet appointments, with the exception of the Prime Minister, do not require parliamentary endorsement. A court here in Seoul has refused a prosecution request for a warrant to arrest a former environment minister on charges she abused her power by forcing those considered critical of the incumbent administration to step down from their posts. Lee Seung-jae with the details.
Early Tuesday, the Seoul Eastern District Court ruled that former Minister of Environment Kim Eun-kyung presented no risk of flight or destroying evidence given her status as a retired public official, as they denied an arrest warrant request over her alleged abuse of power. Kim, who was the Environment Minister from 2017 to 2018, stands accused of pressuring several heads of public institutions affiliated with the ministry to step down and disadvantaging one of them for not complying with the demand. The allegations against Kim have drawn attention as some former top officials from the previous Park Geun-hye administration are standing trial on similar power abuse charges. This includes Kim Gi-chun, Park's former chief of staff, and former culture minister Cho Yun-sun, who were indicted for keeping a blacklist of artists and celebrities to freeze them out of the mainstream media due to their left-leaning tendencies. The probe into Kim began after a complaint was filed by the main opposition Liberty Korea party. It accused the former minister of having sought to replace those appointed under the former conservative administration with appointees of her own choice without going through a due selection process. The presidential office of Cheongwade is defending the former minister, insisting that decision-making on who should be or should not be appointed as top officials is well within the power of a minister. Kim says she'll do her best to explain to the court and will wait for the judge's decision, as she has undergone a closed-door interrogation over the allegations, which she strongly denies. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, President Moon Jae-in will meet King Philippe of Belgium for a bilateral summit today to review the progress made on their relations since they first established ties in 1901. It's the first visit by a European monarch to Korea since President Moon took office, and the first visit by a Belgian king in 27 years. According to the presidential office, they will discuss ways to expand their economic ties, mainly in information and communications technology, chemistry, logistics, and food, areas where both countries have strengths. President Moon is also expected to ask for Belgium's support in the ongoing efforts to establish peace on the Korean Peninsula as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. The South Korean men's national football team will try to keep their winning run going when they host Colombia tonight for a friendly right here in Seoul. South Korea are coming off a 1-0 victory against Bolivia last Friday. Despite Colombia being much higher in the FIFA rankings than South Korea, the Taeguk Warriors have a good head-to-head record against the South Americans, with 3 wins, 2 draws and just 1 loss. They last met in November 2017, with South Korea winning 2-1 in Suwon. Tonight's match kicks off at 8 p.m. Korea time at Seoul World Cup Stadium. The 4-page summary of Robert Mueller's report that was given to U.S. Attorney General William Barr on Sunday is being seen as a huge win for President Trump, as it shows no evidence of collusion or colluding with the Russian government or any other Russians during the last election that happened famously in 2016. But now the Democrats are demanding the release of the full document because they say they want to see the full picture. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Hong Yu. So many thought this might draw a line under the issue, this release of this summary, but it appears that this is certainly not the case.
Right, Mara. Congressional Democrats are requesting the release of the entire document and not just a summary from AG William Barr. They don't agree on much, but President Trump said the release of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's full report wouldn't bother him at all if Barr says he can. The 4-page summary was clearly not what the Democrats were expecting, and now they are plotting strategy for their own investigations of obstruction of justice and Russian election interference. Barr's document said Mueller found no evidence that Trump's campaign conspired or coordinated with Russia to defeat his rival candidate Democrat Hillary Clinton. However, in the latter part of the letter, which addresses allegations Trump tried to obstruct justice, the report summary does not conclude that the president committed a crime, but it also does not exonerate him. Barr said the special counsel did not draw a conclusion as to whether the president committed an obstruction of justice. Trump, who had spent months railing against former Justice Department officials and had described Mueller as conflicted, disgraced, and a liar, has changed his tune, saying Mueller has acted honorably. British Prime Minister Theresa May still hopes to change lawmakers' minds and get the agreement to her twice-rejected Brexit divorce deal if she puts it to a new vote. She acknowledged she might lose control of the Brexit process to lawmakers who want to force her government to change direction as the UK's departure from the EU was delayed and the new date is up in the air. May told lawmakers in the House of Commons that it's with great regret that she had to conclude there's still not sufficient support in the House to bring back the deal for a third meaningful vote. Chinese President Xi Jinping and French President Emmanuel Macron have signed 15 business contracts worth billions of euros in Paris, including a multi-plane order with Airbus and a more than $1 billion contract for EDF to build an offshore wind farm in China. China ordered 300 Airbus planes on Monday, worth about $34 billion. They also signed a $1 billion contract to cooperate on energy saving in developing countries. The two sides also agreed to lift an embargo of French poultry exports. Apple CEO has revealed Apple is going to start making original movies, TV shows, and even issue a credit card. Speaking at a press event on Monday in California, Tim Cook said Apple's lineup of films and TV shows will be available via the company's TV app on Apple devices, which already have access to various cables and streaming subscription services. Apple is also launching a streaming service called Apple TV Plus this fall, which will include a number of original shows on an ad-free original video subscription service. The credit card will be available on all iOS devices in the Wallet app and is aimed at attracting users by paying 2% of any Apple Pay purchases back to customers.
Now it's time for our Life and Info segment. As the name suggests, we are going to be focusing on information useful for your everyday life, whether you live here in Korea or are watching us internationally. So starting today, let's start with some news that affects us here in Korea. Regulations that previously restricted the purchase of LPG cars for the general public here have been scrapped. And this is all in a bid to slash fine dust emissions in the country, and we hope it is successful. So Bin with more.
Apart from taxis and rental cars, there are few LPG cars on Korea's streets. But starting today, the regulations restricting LPG car purchases have been abolished, and the general public will be able to buy the vehicles. It's expected that people switching over to LPG could help reduce fine dust emissions. Unrestricted purchases of LPG cars had been banned in the past due to propane supply issues, but as the fine dust crisis becomes increasingly unbearable, things have changed.
One of the issues was the limited supply of propane, therefore there was a need to import it and distribute it. But since the fine dust problem is such a serious issue, the government seems to have abolished the restriction for the best of the public.
With LPG car purchases becoming available to the public, drivers will have more options. Also, people who currently own a gasoline or diesel vehicle will be allowed to convert them into LPG as well. One of the causes of fine dust is nitrogen oxide emissions from vehicles. Diesel-powered cars emit the most at 0.56 grams per kilometer. LPG cars emit the least, just 0.006 gram per kilometer. So an uptick in the number of LPG cars on the streets should bring down fine dust levels.
In Japan in early 2000s, they had a no-diesel car policy and had vehicles convert to LPG. Since the modification is directly connected to fine dust, it could be an effective way to reduce emissions. And since switching to environmentally friendly cars is necessary, LPG cars are the most realistic option since they are cheap and LPG produces far less dirty emissions.
Bin, Arirang News.
Switching gears now, traditional Korean ginseng chicken soup, otherwise known here in Korea as samgyetang, has the chance to become a big hit with people in the UAE. It's the first time for a country in the Middle East to allow imports of the halal processed chicken soup, and it's expected, hopefully at least, to serve as a bridgehead for expanding Korean exports to that region. Park Se-young with more.
Carefully prepared chicken is stuffed with ingredients like glutinous rice, ginseng, and garlic. The chicken is then sealed with broth, sterilized and cooked before they're sent to the packing room to be shipped. This is the manufacturing process for samgyetang, traditional Korean ginseng chicken soup that's often consumed as a healthy food on hot summer days in Korea. After having gained popularity in China and Japan, 1,200 packs of halal processed samgyetang were shipped off to the United Arab Emirates late last week. The UAE is the first Islamic country in the Middle East to allow such imports. Halal food refers to products that are prepared in concordance with Muslim dietary laws. According to Korea's Ministry of Agriculture, it has reached an agreement with the UAE on quarantine standards regarding samgyetang and beef. The ministry added the samgyetang maker was certified halal by both the Japanese and the UAE halal certification bodies, a costly and timely process.
In addition to meeting quality standards for samgyetang in Korea, we passed strict food safety standards required by the Middle East for exports.
In Malaysia, sales of Korean instant noodles or ramen have been on the rise, boosted by the popularity of K-pop and Korean dramas. The most popular choice is halal-certified Daebak instant noodles, developed by a joint venture between Korea's Shinsegae Food and Malaysia's Mami Double Decker. An average of 300,000 packs have been sold every month since last year's launch, and the first batch of a new flavor sold out in just 2 weeks earlier this month. The market share of Korean products in the Malaysian instant noodles market jumped from less than 1% in 2014 to about 12% in 2018. Last year alone, Korean companies sold $20 million worth of instant noodles in Malaysia. With the increase in local demand, Malaysia has risen as a major importer of Korean instant noodles, along with China, the US, Japan, and Taiwan. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
Lotte Duty Free has become the first Korean duty-free operator to open stores in Australia and New Zealand. On Monday, Korea's largest travel retailer held an opening ceremony for a new outlet at Brisbane International Airport. Since January, Lotte Duty Free has been operating 4 retail outlets in Australia and 1 in New Zealand after signing a contract with Melbourne-based JR Duty Free last August. Lotte Duty Free now runs 12 branches in 7 countries and plans to open new stores in Vietnam. In the first half of this year, the company aims to achieve nearly $900 million in sales from its overseas branches by 2020. Now, 2 structures of the Gyeongbokgung Palace in downtown Seoul will be open to visitors from April. According to the Cultural Heritage Administration, public access to the inside of Gyeonghwaeru Pavilion, where kings of the Joseon dynasty held parties, and Jibokje, which is a small library where copies of royal books are stored, will be temporarily allowed between April 1st and October 31st. To visit the pavilion, visitors must, stress here, must pre-book through the Palace website. Pre-booking is not required to visit the library between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. Access to both sites will be free of charge. And that's where we're going to wrap up today's Life and Info segment. Now it's time for the weather with our Lee Ji-hyun.
Good morning. Mild winds will help warm us into early to mid-April-like temperatures by the afternoon, as daily highs will jump 5 to 7 degrees higher than Monday. But we won't be able to enjoy the early spring weather because of toxic smog again. Right now, regions in the east are having high levels of ultrafine dust, but levels will gradually increase in most areas except Gwangju, Jeollanam-do Province and Jeju Island. In taking a closer look at today's daily highs in Daegu and Gwangju especially will jump to 20 degrees Celsius this afternoon with a big daily temperature gaps of nearly 15 degrees between lows and highs, while Seoul will get up to 16 degrees this afternoon, and most areas will see brighter skies as the day goes on today. And as for the weather outlook, temperatures will drop below the seasonal average starting Friday. So there will be still go up and down for a while as for the temperatures. So be sure to dress accordingly. That's Korea for you, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now on this Tuesday morning here in Seoul. Stay tuned to Arirang TV. And a reminder that we'll have our next newscast coming up at noon, Korea time, with our very own Lee Ji-yoon. So until then, goodbye.
Planning a self-guided tour in Korea? We'll let you peek at the most beautiful hours from dawn to night in Korea.